What's up guys, this is Caleb. I'm the general manager here at SRK Cycles and you're watching Tips from a Salesman. What's up guys, this is Caleb here and today's video is things to ask a dealer when purchasing a motorcycle. Now, the first thing when we're talking to a dealer is we're not buying a private sale, so you are not talking to the owner of the motorcycle. So the full objective really is to figure out who owned it, what type of person owned it, and then that's probably going to lead you into how the bike was maintained. So really what you're trying to do is you're trying to profile the previous owner or owners, and therefore you can kind of tell whether you have a good bike on your hands. There's a lot of caveats there. Unlike buying a car, it's not as important when buying a bike. The number one important thing is figuring out the overall cosmetic and running condition of the motorcycle. But when you're buying it from a dealer, it's a good thing to try and figure out and profile who the previous owner was. And so the first thing I always ask is, how did you get the bike? And so I'm not really asking that to figure out, did it come from an auction? Did a guy trade it in? Because that doesn't really matter to me. I'm more trying to figure out if the bike was serviced at that dealer. So I could ask, was this bike serviced here? If they say no, you ask, okay, how did you get the bike? And they would say, well, it's a local trade-in. Then you can maybe start to piece together where the bike was serviced or who might have owned the bike. Or if they say, well, a guy came down to buy a brand new bike from us, a leftover, he came from out of state. You might be able to figure out, was the bike from in-state or from out-of-state? And what you're really trying to do is trying to figure out the previous owner, where they might have serviced the bike, or if that current dealer has any history on the bike, maybe if they sold it brand new. The next question I ask then ensuing, we don't give out personal information to people that have owned the bikes, but a good question to ask a dealer, and usually they can tell you this because they have the title on hand, is do you know the last state it was registered in? And what town did those owners live in? Because on the title, especially in Pennsylvania, it'll tell you the last state that it was registered, and I think on every title, it'll tell you the last state that the bike was registered in, and then you can kind of see also on the front who the last person was that owned it, because dealers have reassignment spots, but people have to be put on the front of the title, individuals, not businesses. So you can kind of deduce where the bike came from. Now, if you can deduce where the bike originated, you can deduce most likely, and this is a generalization, but you can most likely deduce where that bike might have been serviced. If you buy a Ducati and the guy is from a rural town in Kansas, you could look up that rural town in Kansas, you could do a Google search of the closest Ducati dealers, and now you might be able to find out where that bike was registered. If there was any recalls done, you can figure out who did the recall. That's all public information. Now, once you found that out, you found the service center, now you can ask for the service history because you have the VIN number, the bike's being sold, you can tell them, I'm looking to purchase this bike. What information can you give me? Once you've deduced that, now you're finding out a lot more about the bike just from simply asking your dealer those questions. That's a very good question to ask. It's very good to do your homework when it comes to those things. Because if you're buying certain bikes, certain Hondas, it might not matter, but if you're buying a BMW and the dealer says, I don't have any history on this, and you say, okay, and they say, well, we haven't serviced it. Okay, you've gone through question one. Question two would be, okay, where's the last place this bike was registered? They can kind of give you a general location. You look up the general location, BMW dealers around, you start calling around, maybe you'll find the service history. Now you have a little bit more information on that bike. The next question to ask would be maybe what did they trade it in on? If you ask what they traded it on, you might be able to deduce who it was. If they're upgraded to a touring bike, it might be, based on price point and based on if it's new or if it's used, you might be able to deduce how much money they spent on their new bike. That might also tell you what stage of life they're in. I don't know many 20-year-olds that would be upgrading to a CVO Road Glide, but if the person was upgrading to a CVO Road Glide, I would have to conclude that person could afford a CVO Road Glide. And so I'd probably be, and this is all general, I would be, generalizing that the person could probably afford all the maintenance on the bike that they had traded in. And so I'm starting to kind of piece together maybe a profile as to a person who had traded that bike in, and I'm starting to get closer and closer as to whether I want to purchase that bike from the dealer. I always ask when it comes to wrapping up, I always ask how long they've had the bike. And if I can figure that out online, usually, based off pictures, you can see if the pictures were taken outside, if it was the winter time, you can sometimes see, when the date the bike was published. If you figure out how long they've had the bike, you might be able to figure out how eager they are to sell that bike. And if you figure out how eager they are to sell that bike, you might get a better deal than you thought. And the last question I always ask dealers is when I know that I'm looking to purchase, I always ask dealers, will you take, and then I give them the amount of money that I'm looking to spend on that bike. That money then, that number comes from all the previous questions. I figure out, the service history. I'm trying to figure out the service history. I'm trying to figure out who the previous owner might have been, trying to put a profile together. Okay, they probably maintain the bike. I don't know for sure. They probably maintain the bike. Now I'm gonna make you an offer. This is the final question. Will you take X for this bike? And it's, a reasonable number. I'm not trying to offend the human. It is your job to negotiate, and so you ask, will you take X for this bike? Here at SRK, we don't really negotiate on our prices just because our bikes are here they leave so fast, and we're very firm on our prices. But a lot of dealers, they might not sell as many bikes, or they might sell a lot of bikes and they might, negotiate a ton. So you just ask, I'm looking to pay this. Is that even in the realm? Will you take this? And usually they'll come back with an offer and you guys can, negotiate on that price. But that's usually my final question that I ask is, will you take? And then I throw out a number. So those are questions, guys. Like I said, those are questions to ask a dealer when you're purchasing a new bike.